I'm here today with Ken McCarthy, author of the book JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionist Extremism. Ken, thanks so much for joining today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and I'm so grateful to YouTube. That's how I discovered you, and I've really enjoyed your work. I'm thrilled to be on the show.
Likewise. Well, thanks so much for sending the book over. Most people, I would say, until the past couple years, really had no idea about the relationship between John F. Kennedy and his brother against Zionism, or how their relationship was with Israel in general. So, your book really, I don't think it's opinion book at all. It's really just showing kind of documents. It's really just laying them out.
Yeah, documents, chronologies, a little bit of historical context.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. It's such a big topic to get into, but tell me a little bit, just a broad overview of where did John F. Kennedy's relationship with Zionism really start, and how did this relationship seem to go sour, really?
What's interesting about him is his father was one of the wealthiest men in the world. So he wasn't just a wealthy guy; he was one of the wealthiest guys. And he was an Irishman, Irish American, which meant he was not part of the Anglo complex. Quite the contrary. I'm of Irish ancestry, and in the United States, we were really looked down upon in the 19th century and early 20th century. So we're just naturally compassionate. We're not down with let's kill people who've got stuff we want. I mean, we went through that ourselves.
Yep.
Uh, so that you have the fact that the Kennedys are Irish is very important. I think people may not realize, but the Irish imposed the Irish famine on Ireland. It was not a natural occurrence. There was a potato blight that struck all of Europe.
Yep.
But nobody starved but the Irish, because the Irish had been taken off their land and all they had was potatoes. So when the potatoes died, they died in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And the British wouldn't allow relief ships to bring relief food, wouldn't allow Irish fishermen, to go out and catch fish. I mean, it was brutal, right? So you got to understand, the Kennedys are Irish, right?
Yeah.
That's step one. Step number two is they were very interested in world affairs. It was the norm for the Kennedy family, for even the young children, to sit around the breakfast table, and the father would ask them about what was going on around the world, and they were supposed to know.
Yeah.
So they were getting educated at a very early age. And then young John Kennedy took a world tour as a very young man in his 20s. He went to Indochina, also known as Vietnam, and he did go to Palestine. And he wrote in the book, we have a letter from his father saying, "This is not going to end well. Like
Yeah.
you can't be imposing. These people cannot be imposing themselves on the people whose land this is." So he was already aware that there was something wrong. In the 1950s, he took an incredible, unprecedented stand. I mean, you really have to study American history deeply to find anything comparable. I can't even think of anything. But in the 1950s, in the middle of the Cold War, he backed basically the Indochina rebellion, and he also backed the Algerian rebellion.
Yep.
He gave long speeches on the Congress floor saying that, listen, this is not right. This is not good. This is not what we should be supporting. And he made great enemies in France for that. At that time in the 50s, France was in Algeria, and I'm sure most of your readers know that, or listeners know that France, did horrific things in Algeria, starting in the early 1800s. And the Algerians were fighting for their independence. And Kennedy got on. I mean, even today, you wouldn't even. I can't imagine any time in American history when a congressman got on the floor of Congress and said, "Let's support an indigenous people against one of our imperial allies."
Yeah.
I can't even think of that ever happening. So then he became president, and he was an American president. He wasn't a bought and sold president. And he looked around the world at what would be best for America, and first, which I understand because he was president. And he also said, well, look, what can we do for the rest of the world? And he said, you know what? We really should be encouraging independence all over the world. We're in a battle with the Soviets, which was true, ideological battle. And if we want to be the good guys, we should act like the good guys, a very simple concept. And so much so that when Algeria finally won its independence, he invited the newly elected president of Algeria to come to a lavish reception. And again, when I look into American history, I'm trying to find a reception equal to the lavishness with which he celebrated the Algerian independence. They were in the Rose Garden. He had representatives of all the major military, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, but not just three guys with the flag, like 20, guys in the dress uniforms. They did the gun salute, whatever it is, 21 gun salute. All the top cabinet members were there. He even brought his wife who had the little baby John John. I mean, he was all in, and he even gave a speech on TV saying, "Hey, congratulations to our Algerian friends. We won our independence. It was hard. You won your independence. It was hard, but it's worth it."
Yep.
I mean, this is unbelievable.
And
So,
Israel didn't like that either.
oh my God. Well, Israel was helping the French suppress the Algerians.
Yep.
Um, and, they, and we'll get into, we might get into some of the history. Some of the urban warfare that they learned from the British, they brought over and taught to the French to apply against the Algerian freedom fighters. Um, so then he's looking around the world, and one of the places he looked was Palestine and Israel. And he noticed, or he was told, that they were developing nuclear weapons. And Kennedy was completely against nuclear weapons. It was one of the most important issues in his life and his presidency. And he had succeeded against all odds in a test ban, which meant Russia, the Soviet Union, and some other countries signed an agreement. We're not going to test nuclear weapons above ground anymore. Believe it or not, in the 1950s, they were just blowing up atomic bombs in the deserts of Nevada, in the deserts of Algeria, in the Pacific Ocean on these little islands. It was madness, and he got these countries to stop. His next goal was to put a freeze on development of new weapons, and then his third goal was dismantling the weapons. This would have been a great thing for humanity, and this was very important to him. So when the CIA told him, "Hey, those Israeli guys, well, it looks like they're building nuclear weapons," he said, "Whoa, that can't be." And he immediately was in contact with the top leadership of Israel and said, "We have to," and he was very polite, he was very diplomatic, but he said, "We have to see your nuclear experimental facility, and we have to see it now. And we have to get a
Yep.
full inspection." And of course, they pulled their usual nonsense. "Oh, it's not the right time of year, and the weather's too hot," and whatever nonsense they came up with. Um, Simultaneous with that, we have a law in the United States, which interestingly enough was put in practice, excuse me, during the 1930s. In the 1930s, the Nazi regime was spending a ton of money with the help of American industrialists propagandizing in the United States. And it got exposed, and people were horrified. People used to care about these kinds of things in the United States. They didn't like the idea of foreign countries propagandizing us and buying our. Yeah, now it's a new world. So Roosevelt put in a law basically saying, okay, you want to lobby in the United States, fine, but you have to register with the State Department, and we have to know every penny you spend. We have
Yep.
to know where it came from, and we have to know where it went. And every country from New Zealand to Botswana follows that law. And of course, Israel does not follow the law and wasn't following it in the 60s. And Bobby Kennedy, the brother of John, who at the time was Attorney General, he said he was on it. They were on it. They wanted to get the Zionists to register their group. And so the two pillars of Zionist power, one, they never have had to register as lobbyists, which has allowed them to corrupt every single institution in our country, including every congressman and woman. Most of them. There's probably a few holdouts, but they're not many.
Yep.
And then their second power is they apparently have nuclear weapons. So Kennedy was in the process of shutting that down. And by the way, this got hot and heavy in the summer of 1963. And of course, in November of 1963, he got a bullet in the head. So, and what's so strange is people will talk about the mafia did it, the military industrial complex did it, organized crime did it, the French, they'll even say the French did it, and they'll list everybody on earth, but they'll never talk about the overarchingly important motivation that Israel had to eliminate Kennedy. And when you look at organized crime, the CIA. I didn't mention the CIA originally, but CIA, um, the Cubans. Every one of those groups had a Zionist element, a strong Zionist element in it. The CIA being the most prominent one. The head of counterintelligence, and if people don't, what counterintelligence is basically spying on the spies. So
Yep.
while you're running your secret operations, you have to know what the other guys are doing, and you also have to hide your operations from everybody. So that's the counterintelligence division. And this is a very powerful and very secretive organization. In fact, today, if you Google who is the head of counterintelligence in the United States, you will not get an answer.
Mm.
Okay, so it's sort of the spies with it's sort of the core of the intelligence operations in the United States. And it was so secretive that the head of it, when the Kennedys were murdered, both of them, was James Jesus Angleton. Excuse me. He had his own private office that was built like a safe. Like it had a big, door that you'd see like on a bank, and
Yeah.
so to get so and there was another door beyond that, and then within his office, there were multiple safes, and he was basically allowed to run his own operation. Normally, in an intelligence operation, everything gets fed back to a central source. You find out what's going on in Uganda, you find out what's going on in Argentina, and you file it, and everybody's got access to it. Not so with the work of James G. Sangleton. He was running an operation within the operation that was not linked to the CIA's normal file system.
Mm.
And he was given the power to run all kinds of operations that did not have to be fully explained to the director of the Central Intelligence, or did not have to be explained in a formal way.
Yeah, and this was called the Israel Files is kinda what it was termed. I read an article about this specifically. He quickly took control of the Israel Files and made it a very secretive file while every other country's file was kind of out in this centralized system.
Exactly. Exactly. Because originally, before it became a covert operations thing, the Central Intelligence Agency meant that exact thing. The Central Intelligence Agency. We gather information on everything going on in the world. It's all in one place. If anybody within the intelligence world needs to get information, they can just go and get it. But you're right, the Israeli files were not open. And he maintained a relationship with the Mossad from well, he was literally one of the founding members of the Mossad. I mean, he wasn't on their payroll, but he was encouraging them, educating them, training them, cooperating with them. He was very, very friendly with the Mossad throughout his career. Um, so the other thing that was part of this is that they were, and this finally has come out recently. I know you've done an excellent job, by the way, of reading the different papers and finding them. And there is a paper where there is a memo that says, yes, Angleton is working with his Israeli colleagues on operations that are not on the books. I mean, basically, I'm paraphrasing it, but that's what the memo said. And the part where it said Israeli had been blocked out until just 2 or 3 years ago.
So this is all yeah, I mean, the government's been hiding this up until the point where they just simply couldn't hide it anymore because it's so obvious. While with James Jesus Angleton, while John F. Kennedy was working to stop the Israelis from developing nuclear weapons, James Angleton was doing something. Basically, he was going against John F. Kennedy's wishes and doing the complete opposite and assisting the Israelis in the development of their nuclear weapons program. Is that correct?
Yeah, it seems to be completely accepted by mainstream historians that James Angleton assisted the Israelis in getting nuclear weapons material for their bombs.
Yep.
Like, which is amazing. You would think that would be headline. I mean, that's a trait. That's called being a traitor.
Yep.
That's a hanging. That's still a hanging offense in the United States, but apparently it's no problem.
No. And why when John F. Kennedy actually went ahead and got that nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviets, Angleton was furious. He was furious at it because he felt like that it was just not the right move, not the right diplomatic move. And the Israelis actually sent a letter to John F. Kennedy, kind of a backhanded compliment, saying, "Congratulations on getting the nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviets." But you could tell it upset the Israelis as well because they could tell that they were kind of next, that John F. Kennedy was working against them as well.
Yeah, and it wasn't against Israel. it was against the Israeli government behaving in a criminal way, like he was just trying to enforce basic law. Like he didn't have a vendetta against Israel, you
No.
know. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and when you were another thing that's interesting, you were mentioning kind of John F. Kennedy's, I guess, just humanitarian work and pushing for independence. He actually infuriated the apartheid South Africa government as well because he did the exact same thing. He just truly stuck to his morals and values, and he mentioned that blacks in apartheid South Africa are treated worse. They have worse performance outcomes even under the same conditions, or sorry, because of worsening conditions. So he really sook up for blacks in apartheid South Africa. That infuriated the apartheid South Africa government. And apartheid South Africa also was incredibly close to the Israeli government at the time as well. They kind of both felt like they were Western outposts, in a hostile region to them, while they were actively kind of suppressing the region.
Yeah, I think the last two countries to disavow South Africa were Israel and the United States.
Yeah,
Pretty sure that's how it went. Every other country in the world. By the way, just as a sidebar, how'd you like those Olympics?
I know, right? It's
Well, it was phenomenal.
absolutely
I'm
no,
also half
absolutely.
Italian, so I'm very proud of my Italian compatriots. Um,
No, all of it. And my sister actually lives in Italy right now, and she was telling me all about it. So it's great. But no, so and why Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's brother, he was during John F. Kennedy's administration, he was the Attorney General. So he was, working very closely. So when we say JFK's administration was seeking to also separately from the nuclear issue, was also trying to have the Zionists lobby register as a foreign agent. His brother was heavily involved in that. Actually, all of the correspondence was really going to his brother, not to John F. Kennedy
oh yeah,
directly.
no, that was Bobby Kennedy's domain for sure. He was on it personally.
Yeah.
And it was a very unusual administration. It's unprecedented in American history, two brothers having such power. And during the time, there were some people that thought maybe Bobby was really running things,
Yeah.
and
Really.
John was just the charming front guy. But he was a very intelligent man. He's the only American president to ever get a college degree in international relations.
Oh, interesting. Even until today.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Clinton got something from Georgetown, but it was more like go get this degree and you can work for the ambassadorial department. It wasn't really a serious. Well, I don't know how serious or unserious it was, but Kennedy it was very unusual to get a degree in international relations at all when Kennedy went to college.
Yeah.
So he's always been interested in this, and again, this goes back to the father. And I do think it goes back to being Irish and realizing that maybe the British, and maybe we'll talk about the British in a bit, are not the nicest. Their elites are not the nicest people that have ever lived. Um,
Well, I've always, especially after October 7th, what I've realized is the Irish have been standing up and is standing by my side with Palestine. It's shocking. Just the level of support is amazing. And then also Catholics, interestingly enough, I didn't really take the time to, I never really, up until this point, really noticed the difference in the way different Christian denominations kind of handle things. But Catholics have also been a lot more open and against Zionism than other denominations. And I'm pretty sure John F. Kennedy was both of those things.
yeah, he was Irish Catholic for sure.
Yeah, and,
Um,
yeah, and it kind of adds it just adds to the tapestry of, John F. Kennedy's relationship with Israel. It wasn't the nuclear issue was definitely, I'd say, one of the primary main issues, but it was just the entire relationship in general. There was just differing interests there.
well, even when he was a young man traveling, and he wrote this letter. It's in the book to his father. He's like, "This situation, it doesn't look good. Like, you can't have all these people pouring in from other parts of the world into somebody else's country. How's this going to work in the long run?" I mean, he really saw the impossibility of the situation. This was before 1948, too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when his brother RFK was going back and forth with AIPAC's predecessor at the time, the American Zionist Council, the president of the American Zionist Council actually sent a letter back to RFK and said that having the lobby register would actually, would basically end the Zionist movement in the United States. They felt that the Zionist movement was facing an existential threat by registering. So,
Yeah.
if you wanna touch a little bit on that, explain, at the time, what was the Zionist lobby in the United States? Because of course it wasn't just one group. It was really just the efforts of many different groups, and they wanted to end the Zionist lobbying in general, not just, for AIPAC's predecessor, but their ultimate goal was to end the Zionist lobby, correct? Or to
Well,
have it register with FARA.
well, I mean, the American law is kind of open-handed. It's like you can lobby anything you want, but we need to know
Where it's coming from, the
where
money.
we need to know every dollar you got from where, every dollar you spent, who got it. I think it's even so strict that if you meet with three or more people and on behalf of a foreign nation, you have to send a report to the State Department documenting, hey, we had this meeting in a hotel room with five guys, and
Imagine if that would I mean, we're seeing AIPAC meet with Israeli officials out in the open. They're just bragging about it. Isaac Herzog, Netanyahu, the level of backhanded, behind the door meetings is insane. I wonder if that's happening with with AIPAC right now.
well, then flying all the congressmen to Israel. I mean, it's utter madness, and yet it endures. I'm going to suggest that to follow up on something that you said earlier about Catholicism versus Protestantism and how that relates to Israel, because there's something current in our current events right now
Mhm.
that also explains the power that Israel has in the United States. Um, the first group that Israel has to keep in line are the Jewish Americans, right? And they want to make sure that as many Jewish Americans as possible support Israel. So they
Yep.
spend enormous amounts of money just propagandizing American Jews. Now, as you know, because we were on Jen Perlman's show, um, not all American Jews are loving Israel or loving Zionism. In fact, some of the most outspoken opponents in the United States against what's going on are American Jews.
Yeah.
So the Israelis spend a lot of money trying to catch the young Jewish people. Like my brother married a Jewish girl, and they sent their children to a Jewish day school or whatever, daycare, not daycare, school, whatever, high school, grammar school, and it was just a regular private school. They just wanted to get into a good school, and that was the best one in the neighborhood. And what was interesting is they learned some Hebrew. Okay, fair enough. What interested me, and I noticed right away, the Hebrew teacher was from Israel,
Mm.
and the Hebrew teacher was known, and she also taught the kids the bar mitzvah. You got to learn the book and all this stuff, and it's quite involved. Um, not only was she straight from Israel, she was known to be a wacko Zionist. So
Mm.
that's just an example. So there's all these private Jewish schools in the United States, in big cities, Chicago, New York, L.A., San Francisco, and where are they going to get their Hebrew teachers from? Where are
Yeah.
they going to get the people that are going to teach the kids to prepare them for their bar mitzvah? They import them very inexpensively because it's subsidized. From where? From Israel. And so that's an example of the Israelis, getting in early and trying to get the kids and brainwash them. And we all know that thing. Hey, everybody, if you're Jewish, you get a free trip to Israel,
Yeah.
right? It's just crazy. And they're very heavily brainwashed. They're often hooked up with romantic partners when they're there. I mean, it's just wild. And then there's this whole thing of Jewish summer camps. Um, Kids go to summer camp, and when I was a kid, one year I went to a Catholic summer camp because we're a Catholic family. So if you're Jewish, you go to a Jewish summer camp. It makes sense. But I had a friend that went to one of these, and it was crazy. They would raise the Israeli flag every day and play the Israeli anthem and march around. And there was a thing that they would do. They would wake the kids up in the middle of the night, and say, "We've got to flee. They're after us." These are like 8-year-old children, and they're like so that's pillar one of the Israeli propaganda. Number one, try to capture and brainwash deeply as many Jewish Americans as they can. They have failed, luckily, in some cases. But the second pillar, and this goes to what you were saying earlier, is the Christian pillar.
Yep.
And this Christian pillar is super, super, super important to the Israelis. The guy that replaced JFK when JFK was shot came from a Christian Zionist family.
Yeah.
People, how that is not known by the whole world, I don't know. But he had an aunt who was like the head of the local Zionists of America chapter.
Lyndon
Uh,
B. Johnson.
yeah, LLBJ, his,
Crazy.
his his aunt.
And
Um,
I say the worst decision you could ever make as a president is have somebody that loves Israel more as your vice president. It's
Yeah.
It just creates interesting opportunities. In 2012, during Obama's administration, or when Obama was campaigning, this was making headlines at the time. The newspaper columnists of the Jewish Syndicate News was the name of the outlet. He published an article which immediately, triggered the Secret Service and everybody else. And he said, the article, I'll have to send it to you. It said, if you were Netanyahu, what would you do? And the article basically says, if you feel like you're the president of Israel, or sorry, the prime minister, and you're in a situation where the president of the United States is not the greatest ally to Israel, but there is a very supportive vice president, how far would you go to protect the state of Israel? And would you consider ordering the Mossad to put a hit on the president of the United States? It was a really shocking article. This was in the United States back in
Wow.
2012, immediately triggered the Secret Service. The Anti-Defamation League stated they completely condemned the article. All of these, Jewish organizations condemned it, and they tried to pull away. He had to resign. But he did touch on something that's important, that we have to assume these heads of governments, these intelligence agencies, they don't act based on moral. They act based on what will advance their interests. So it just makes logical sense that if you're Israel, and Israel today wasn't the Israel it was back then. Back then, there were actual existential threats that Israel faced in the
Mhm.
region. Didn't have nuclear weapons at the time, which is why they wanted them. It was surrounded by hostile enemies. There were very serious existential threats. They felt like John F. Kennedy was a threat to their existence. So, it only makes logical sense that not, it only makes logical sense that they would consider the option to assassinate a US president they deem a threat to their existence.
Yeah, I mean, let's make it personal. You're in a room and some guy comes at you with a knife, or in
Yeah,
your mind, he's coming at you with a knife, and you've got a gun. You'll shoot him.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not that, and what's interesting though with John F. Kennedy, and it really touches on, if you look at America today, you're like, well, John F. Kennedy was right. He told the Israelis, I don't want to get too close to you. I'm going to be an equal player, but ultimately my actions are going to benefit you. And they're going to help you because I don't want to antagonize the Arab world, and I don't want to antagonize the world against you. So I have to be, a fair player. And that set the Israelis off. But ultimately, if we had a president that truly treated Israel equally with the Arab world, you wouldn't have what we have today, where now the entire
Oh,
world is being antagonized by Israel because of their actions. This would have never happened.
Kennedy had some, I think I have the quote in the book. He said, "I can't imagine that Israel wants to spend the rest of its existence as a garrison state."
Yeah.
Just practical, not even, let's forget the morality for a second, just practical. You can't live that way. So maybe I want to if I could go on a little deep historical detour, because that I've never heard anybody talk about. Um, I believe there's a direct connection between the Zionists and the Nazis, clearly the Italian fascists, and even going and through the Prussian state. Do we have time to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
into?
no, I'm looking at the comments here because I'm seeing a lot of people really interested in what you're saying. So I was just looking at my comments. So no, please do.
Okay, so we all know that there was a period, the Crusades, when ambitious, greedy European guys would put together armies and go to the Middle East and steal stuff.
Yeah.
It was basically the plan, right? How things have not changed, in all these centuries. And so one of the groups that went out there was a group called the Teutonic Knights, and they were German knights. Um, and they failed miserably. They didn't succeed. So they came back to, we call it Germany, but they didn't call it that then. It was just this region. So
Yeah.
they came back to Germany with their tails between their legs, thinking, now what do we do? And they looked around in Poland and Lithuania, and this will become important a little bit later. And they saw all these pagans, because you know Europe wasn't 100% Catholic, and until a while. It took a while to do that. And so
Yeah.
they went to the church and said, "Hey, church, if we make an effort to convert these people to Catholicism, can we steal their land?" And the Pope said, "Yeah, good plan." So they went in and they took over what's now Poland, parts of Lithuania, and and because they weren't welcome, they established by necessity a garrison state.
Mm.
Because you go in, you steal people's land, you murder them, you abuse them, you're not going to be popular, so you have to create this garrison.
And define it just for people that might not know what the word garrison
Well,
state means.
garrison like a fort,
Yeah.
like a fort or a military base. So in other words, you live inside the fort, and you only go out a little bit, and and the key word is militarized.
Yep.
So this group of people who evolved into what's called the Prussians. People may have seen with the funny hats and the things sticking out, and they're marching around and all that. Those are the Prussians. That was an intensely militarized society for centuries by
Mm.
necessity, and they were always fighting with their neighbors. Sound familiar? And their neighbors were, trying to get back at them. And this was the Prussian state. Well, where did and this became a model. Some people looked at it and admired the Prussian state. There were elements in the United States that really admired the Prussians.
Mm.
The Rockefellers, for example. In fact, a lot of what our modern world is really a fusion of the Rockefeller mentality with the Prussian mentality. They
Interesting.
they had a lot of partnerships, industrial partnerships, scientific partnerships, and when the Prussians passed the torch to the Nazis, the Rockefellers were there assisting the Nazis in various ways before, during, and after the war.
Interesting.
Rockefeller agents, their attorneys and so on and so forth. The other group that was very inspired by the Prussians were the Italian fascists. They loved this marching around and this, we're going to militarize society. Everybody's going to be a soldier. Everybody's going to be militant. We're going to hate we're going to try to capture land. We're going to, just so that those Teutonic Knights morphed into the Prussians. They inspired some Americans very strongly. They inspired Italian fascism. Now think about this: where did militant Zionism grow up? Well, it grew up in Germany, obviously, but also a lot of the founders of Zionism were from where? Lithuania and Poland.
Yeah.
Those
Eastern Europe.
people grew up, think about this, those people grew up, whether they were Jewish or not Jewish or Zionists or not Zionists, from the womb all the way into their adulthood, they were living in this intensely militarized garrison style state.
It's all they
That's
knew.
pardon me. Yeah,
It's
go
all
ahead.
they knew.
That was normality to them. This is how you run a state. You kick people around. You regiment everybody, and then you bully everybody that you think is inferior to you. So there's so many things that fed into Zionism. Italian fascism, and we should talk about that if we have the time, because
Yeah.
that's a very key element that very few people talk about. But the Prussian mentality and the Italian fascist mentality are at the absolute core of these current Zionists.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the Italians, the Italian fascists. First of all, the founder of fascism, and he named it. He's the guy that gave the name to fascism. Is Benito Mussolini, and he was already in power in 1922.
And let's
And
define, because we hear the word fascist being thrown around so abundantly now. Let's really define what fascism is for people, for people that hear the word that might not actually understand it, because we keep hearing terms. This person's a fascist. This person's a
yeah,
fascist. So what's it really mean? And then also the kind of the geopolitical angle of how fascism actually exerts itself.
well, what it meant in practice in Italy, and we'll start with Italy because that's where it was founded, was a super powerful state. I mean, we actually, if you don't mind, to tell the full story, we have to take a step back to the late 19th century when this thing called nationalism was becoming a big deal. I'm an Italian, or I'm a German, or I'm a Brit. Um, the Italian nationalists, Italy was just a lot of little principalities. It was just a lot of little tiny states. It didn't become Italy until the late-ish 19th century. And the people that pulled that off were quite brutal, and they were very brutal against the southern Italians.
Mm.
And things got so bad in Sicily and southern Italy. There was a famous American writer, Booker T. Washington, a freed a Black American slave, and he was a writer and a thinker, and he visited southern Italy in that period. And he said he'd never seen people so poor in his life, including slavery in the United States, and he'd experienced it. firsthand.
Well,
They completely, the Northerners, the nationalists, completely raped and pillaged, and it was horrible. There was a huge sulfur mine in uh, Sicily, which you may say, well, it's just who cares? Well, sulfur is very important for gunpowder.
mm,
You can't be a warrior in the modern world unless you have access to a lot of sulfur. And so, literally, the life of the Southern Italians was they were so poor they would have to rent their boys, children, to the sulfur miners just so they could feed the rest of the family. And a lot of those kids never made it back. So anyway, there's a tradition of extreme brutality in Italy. So anyway, but and by the way, the early Zionists of the late 19th century and early 20th century admired that.
yeah.
They openly admired the brutality of the nationalist Italians against the Southern Italians, because there's the racist element in Zionism is baked in the cake from day one.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, at this point, I went to the West Bank back in 2022. I'll probably never be allowed to go back until something changes. But I mean, there all the Jewish settlements, all the Israeli settlements are in the hilltops. The Palestinians are all in the valleys. So they're not just looking down at you psychologically, but they're looking down at you physically the whole time. It feels like something even beyond racism. Like it's almost as if they don't view you as human, and it's important that they view you that way in order to carry out mass atrocities against you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do so.
Correct. Correct.
Uh,
And it goes back to the garrison state, right? The fort, they're up on the hill, which is the better strategic position,
yep.
and it's easier to defend, easier to launch attacks. So one of the things that the fascists did, and this connects directly to James Angleton and connects directly to mid 20th, early 20th century Zionism. It's a direct connection. One of the things that Mussolini did was, of course, he attacked Libya and he attacked Ethiopia, and they killed at least 300,000 people in Ethiopia.
Mm,
And it was the first example of aerial chemical warfare bombing in history. I mean, a lot of the very first bombing of civilians, and I have to say civilians, these weren't military operations. These were direct attacks on civilians using aerial weapons. That was pioneered by the Italian fascists.
mm,
Now, here's the key. At the very same time, and by the way, the Germans, the German idea was we're going to take Eastern Europe and Russia. That's going to be ours. The Italian idea is we're going to take the Eastern Mediterranean.
mm,
They didn't succeed at that, but that was they wanted to do the very same thing that the Nazis attempted in Eastern Europe. The Italians wanted to do in all of the Eastern Mediterranean.
yeah.
Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, so on. So. At the very same time that the fascists were the Italian fascism means here's the government. Here's my hand. Here's the government, and here's our select industrial partners.
Yep.
We're going to operate as one unit, and we're going to regiment society. We're going to tell women how they have to behave, children how they have to behave. It's going to be very, very strict. The,
Yep.
the, the state will control every breath you take, and you will have total allegiance to this corporate government fascist state. And then we're going to go out and steal everybody else's stuff. This is their model of humanity, right? So at the very same time that the fascists were murdering people in Africa and in North Africa, James Angleton's father was in either Milan or Rome, probably Rome. And he was a major industrialist in the United States. There was a thing called the National Cash Register Corporation. Now we
Mm,
think, well, cash register, that's primitive. No, you have to remember there were no computers, there were no personal computers. People used to do business with a drawer full of cash, and they'd write things out and they'd hand it to you. So the cash register was a high-tech instrument. He was a super successful executive with National Cash Register, and they gave him the franchise for Europe, operating out of Rome. I'm pretty sure it was Rome.
mm,
So you're not going to be able to run a large corporation in Italy while a fascist is running the government unless you're a fascist yourself,
yeah.
right? It's just not going to happen. So young James, there would have been people streaming through the house for dinner parties and social gatherings who were hardcore fascists. So he grew up in a fascist, a heavily indoctrinated fascist environment.
Mm,
Um, and let's see, there's another element. Well, anyway, that says a lot right there. Oh, another element to fascism, and the reason the Rockefellers, who were the richest people in America by far, far richer than Bill Gates and all these guys relatively, they controlled so much. The reason that the Rockefellers poured money into fascist Italy and helped fascist Italy so much was they hated communism,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. They didn't they didn't want anybody to ask questions about where they were getting their money and how they were abusing industrial workers. Um, so they hated communism. So Angleton would have grown up hating communism.
Very anti-communist,
Yeah.
very almost to the point where he became neurotic because of it.
Yeah. Oh, I think he was. I think he lost his mind over it
Yeah,
eventually. Um,
absolutely. And this hatred of communism also adds an understanding of why he felt like he needed to be as close as possible to the Israelis, because the Israelis were importing a lot of Soviet Jews. And
correct.
he wanted to make sure that he had the in into that life. He wanted to make sure he had operatives. So he felt that by being close to Israel, he would get an upper hand when it came to the Soviets.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And, so we look at where we are today, and it seems like the United States and Israel are one at this point. It really
Oh
seems
yeah.
like you can't separate it. I always tell Arabs, other Arabs, I'm Palestinian, and I think it's really important for one for Arabs to know that this was never the case. It wasn't always like this, and there was actually administrations that actually sought to have good relationships with the Arab world, uh, which nowadays it feels like it's everything is imposed on them. And when it comes to Americans, we say Israel is our greatest ally. The only reason we say that is because every one of our politicians is bought out to say that.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. It's so we're living in a world of total unreality,
Yeah.
and that's why the Zionists are so concerned with and spend so much money and effort on propagandizing, because that's the base of their survival, imposing unreality on Americans.
Yep.
Um, in fact, I want to go on. So I think I've covered. So you can see that Angleton and fascism and Zionism were linked. He was part of the OSS, which was the forerunner to the CIA,
Yep.
and so because he spoke fluent Italian and was very connected in the Italian society, they made him the station chief in Italy. And so after World War II, that was the very first CIA operation in World War II, was to suppress the communist and socialist political parties that had great popularity in Italy, because it was the communists and socialists that were fighting the Nazis the most effectively during World War II. In fact, it was socialist and communist fighters that actually liberated huge parts of Italy before the Americans even showed up.
Yeah.
And if you go to northern Italy, you'll still see there's still a strong socialist bent there. Um, so, see, I'm losing my train of thought, but he was there. He was in. So he was part of that operation to undermine the Italian political culture.
Well, and he was also basically creating an underground railroad in a way to help Jews escape Nazi Germany as well. That was a big core aspect of his identity in the 1920s, and to escape just kind of brutality and anti-Semitism in Europe. So there was a core. He truly wanted to help Jewish people on top of wanting info on the Soviets. It was really just an entire identity for him.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if he, I wasn't aware that he was involved in helping Jewish people escape
Yeah,
Nazism.
Escape Europe. I'll send you the article. It's from I think the article was called the Israel Files. It was in the
Oh,
same article that mentioned how Angleton also really secretly made the Israel file at the CIA a very like separate file. I'll send you the source for that. But he was basically creating an underground railroad in a way to help Jews flee persecution in Europe.
well, the other people he was helping after World War II is he was helping fascists and Nazis escape.
Oh, really?
Oh
Interesting.
yeah, this is an important thing. The other thing, because the United States looked at, you have to remember, the Italian fascists and certain people in Nazi Germany were allies of the United States before World War II kicked off.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean, John F. Kennedy's father actually, He was kind of against the war and viewed that's another thing that was interesting. John F. Kennedy's father had some, he questioned whether or not the type of relationship the United States would have with should have with Nazi Germany, which was interesting, learning a little bit about John F. Kennedy's father. And then also, James, what I've started to notice, especially nowadays, is that capitalists will tolerate fascism and
Oh,
work
yeah.
with fascism, communists won't. Um,
Right,
and it's
right.
interesting to see how that plays out today as well, and how that kind of led to where we are today.
Yeah, well, the Rockefellers, and I use them as a shorthand, but it was basically this complex of industrialists. Now everything's supposedly all digital, and but you have to make steel at a certain point. You have to like make things and dig coal and everything. And those guys had a lock on everything. I mean, they owned all the oil, all the mines, all the smelters, all the steel refinery. I mean, they owned everything. And you don't operate things like that unless you do things in a regimented way.
Mhm.
And one of the things the Rockefellers were doing was undermining labor activity. And they weren't against murdering labor leaders if necessary. I mean, this is another sort of a dark, very untold part of American history. But in fact, I think American history can be summed up as the war against labor. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and so
interesting.
when they looked at Hitler and Mussolini, there's like, we get it. We can do business with these guys. Mussolini got his start. He was a journalist initially, and then somehow he got involved. And he was originally a leftist, a socialist, and then something flipped, and he became an anti-socialist. And he became very prominent as basically running goon squads to interfere with and beat up labor demonstrators. He was very good at that. And that caught the attention of the Rockefellers and other American industrialists. And they opened the capital gates. All the money could now flow freely into supporting fascist Italy. I mean, America's it's an important industrial economic force in the world. And if America smiles on you, and says, yes, invest in that company, like James Angleton. That's how his father ended up in Italy. The door was opened, you
Yeah.
know. And on the other side, you have a country like Cuba, where we won't let Cuba sell 1 gram of sugar to the United States. We're starving them to death. So anyway, opening that capital gate. So the Rockefellers opened the gate. In fact, if anybody next time if somebody goes to New York City, if you ever go to New York City, and if your viewers walk up Fifth Avenue, and right before you get to Central Park, there's the famous Rockefeller Center with the skating rink and all these popular things. They built 3 pavilions, one for Italy, one for France, and I forget, one for England, I think. The Rockefellers did. The biggest one is for Italy. The
Mm,
most prominent one is for Italy. It's facing on Fifth Avenue. And when they built that, Mussolini was running Italy.
interesting.
So in the big in right in the core of their biggest real estate investment at the time that they ever made in their family's history, they
Yeah,
built a special building specially for the Italian fascists. Um,
interesting.
so uh, Angleton looked the other. Whenever you have a war and the war ends, there's usually a lot of guns lying around.
Yep,
It's like, what are we going to do with this stuff? And a lot of that stuff goes missing, not surprisingly. And Angleton's job, one of his jobs, was to prevent that from happening. Well, it didn't. He didn't succeed. A lot of American munitions went from Italy to Palestine after World War II. And now here's the thing: this is how close the Zionists were with the Italian fascists. They would march in fascist parade. A lot of them moved to Italy. You know.
interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm trying to blank on the guy's name. Zieninski? No, Zaya. Sometimes I.
Well, you know what's interesting is that, I've been doing a lot of research on Argentina recently, and there's a group of people called the Mapuche tribe, the Mapuche people. They call themselves the Palestinians of South America because they're being actively actually having their land stolen by Israelis in Patagonia.
Yeah,
And the Nazis and Jewish people fled to Argentina post World War II. Both groups of people did,
yeah,
which
yeah.
was really interesting because you're like, well, why would the two people that are against each other both flee to the same area? But kind of understanding how World War II especially affected all of this and kind of led. I mean, it led to the formation of Israel ultimately. Um, Nowadays, if we after everything happened, and if we see where we are now, where do things look like they're headed? Really, do you think that based on historical trends, do you think that Israel's current situation is sustainable? Um, do you like where? How do we go from? Do you think it's going to impose normalcy in the Middle East, or because ultimately so much of it is tied to the American empire, not America as a country, but the empire of America as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's the key point there. People keep saying that, oh, Israel is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East, which
Yep,
is the most bizarre statement
ridiculous.
anybody could ever make, and yet they believe it.
Yeah,
And it all goes back to oil, and also the ability to transmit goods from Asia to Europe. The Middle East is the middle,
yeah,
and and now with the gas fields that have been found in the Eastern Mediterranean, that's a huge thing that people are not talking enough about.
in
Uh,
Gaza especially, they found
yeah, I mean, I
off
think,
the
yeah,
shore of
I
Gaza
mean,
as
I
well.
really think the end game for the genocidal maniacs is to turn Gaza into a massive industrial gas-based industrial complex. Uh,
Absolutely.
and these things are huge, by the way. They require a lot of space. And Israel, Israel's a small country, and the only place where there's room for that happens to be in Gaza.
Yeah,
And when you have gas, you not only have the money you make from processing and refining the gas, you also now have very inexpensive energy. So all kinds of industrial things can be attached to, in proximity to that gas. Natural gas is also a raw material for making fertilizer, for making all kinds of chemicals. So I think they're playing a like a, what do you call it, a shell game on Trump. I think Trump thinks he's going to get hotels. He's not going to get nothing. There's going to be, if this goes the way they want, it's going to be an industrial zone. Like if anybody's ever driven through northern New Jersey, where all
yeah.
the oil refineries are, it's just mile after mile after mile after mile of oil refineries. I think that's the goal there. So we know what their goal is. Will they succeed? Oh my God!
Well, let's
They
bring
should.
it back to Zionism in America. I think that's just to kind of, tie things together. Where do you think there's a place for Zionism in America moving
Well,
forward?
I'm glad you raised this, and let's talk about the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Um, People need to, and you were talking earlier about Catholicism versus Protestantism, and of course, there's a million varieties of Protestantism. There's plenty of Protestants that are arm in arm with Palestinians fighting, but not all of them, right? Um, and this goes back to the Rockefellers. So it, hopefully this will I'll be able to bring this together in the next 8 minutes. The Rockefellers spent millions and millions of dollars backing a particular sect of Protestantism,
Mm.
and they used it as a weapon. And they used it as a weapon initially in South America. And so they would send their missionaries, and everybody would become, this kind of right wing Christian, basically. So tremendous amounts of money have been invested by the Rock. And when I say the Rockefellers, it's shorthand for this whole swath of industrialist people who want they. It's a war against labor. They don't want people asking questions,
Yeah.
right? So there is a large sect. It goes under various different names. I mean, we're talking about millions of Americans who go to church every Sunday and sing and dance and do all the stuff they do, who have been trained by their pastors that Israel is sacred to Christianity and
Yep.
that Israelis. And they read this Bible, they take this quote from the Bible: he who blesses Israel will be blessed. He who curses. Well, Israel didn't even exist when the Bible was written, and they're talking about something completely different. But there are millions. This is the frightening thing. This is the structural problem that causes me pause. Who are all in for Israel? They're not well educated. They don't know what's going on in the world. Now we have Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was the most charismatic, popular man of his generation among the conservative young people in America.
Very mainstream. Unlike, Candace Owens and Tucker are also massive, but Charlie Kirk was much more mainstream and palatable to conservatives in general, on
Yes.
both sides. Very the spectrum of conservatism. He fit. He very much so was able to tap all sides more equally within that space.
Well, also he was, cultivated like they from a young age. He started the organization when he was 18.
Yeah.
He did not start an organization when he was 18. Somebody started an organization and put him as the figurehead. No, I don't care how bright he was. At 18, you're not ready to run a multi-state organization with hundreds of employees and so on and so forth. So basically, he was the front man. They had 600 employees at the time, I believe he was shot. Big, big enterprise. They were originally set up to promote American values, hard work, anti-socialist, get married early, have lots of kids, anti-tax, pro-industrial. All right. Well, what's happened in the recent years, and this is why he was killed, and I'm 100% on this one. I'm 100% sure they started surrounding him with people. Now, remember, you're a young guy. You're in your third. He was 32 when he was killed. So all this time that he was ramping up, he's running from city to city, giving speeches, becoming popular. He has no idea who's paying the light bill, or who's paying the rent on the offices, or who's he's the front. He's like the guitar player for the rock and roll band. All he knows is he gets out there and he plays his guitar. He had no idea what was going on. So they and I'm talking about the Zionists here, were systematically surrounding him with executives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, including his wife. I'm going to say that right now. I've seen enough evidence that that woman is a complete fraud. That
Yeah.
she is in the Zionist camp. I'm saying it. You don't have to agree with me.
No,
I'm
no,
saying.
she very much so as a Zionist. I'll definitely agree with that. And she very seems like I'm surprised because people see Charles at the time. Charlie Kirk was doing so many public appearances. He was very front facing, and then all of a sudden his wife came in the picture, and I was like, wow, it seemed like she craves more attention than he ever did.
Well,
Which
and here's the thing: Kirk was raised as as a Protestant. He was becoming, as many some people do. They become interested in becoming Catholics. He was becoming interested in becoming a Catholic. The second thing is he was very concerned about what was going on in Gaza.
yeah,
And he was outspoken about it. There was a case where he invited Tucker Carlson to come to their big, huge event, and he knew what Tucker had in his thought. He knew what Tucker thought about
go
Gaza,
Max.
and he said, "Go hard." Right before he went on, don't hold back, go hard. And you have to believe they were surveilling, not only just watching his public statements. They were, in fact, 4 days after he was shot, I said to somebody, Sabby Sabs, it's a program, a YouTube program. I said they probably knew what he was saying to his wife in bed.
Well, I
Literally.
mean, I just made a video on this yesterday. You don't even need to, Israeli spyware. They just send you a text message. You don't even need to open it. Once it delivers, they immediately hack into your phone. They have graphite and everything else. So, 100%, his phone was being tapped into the entire time. I mean, even journalists like myself, Guy Christensen, he's a Palestine activist. He's a friend of mine. His phone was tainted by graphite. The Israelis were, monitoring him. He's a much smaller, much smaller than Charlie Kirk. So we just have to assume that Charlie Kirk was being monitored the entire time.
Well, and that's what I thought initially. And then as I'm watching this unfold and the evidence is coming out, and Candace Owens is letting a lot of it out, but there's a guy named George Webb, Webb. I recommend everybody look into what he's saying. But they did more than surveil him. They literally surrounded him with executives who are pro-Zionist, Christian. They're Christian. They present themselves as Christians, but they're Zionists.
Mm.
And I think it's very clear, and I believe this right after he was shot, but I believe it 100 times more now. They cannot afford to lose the Christian Zionists in America because that is their real foundation. That is their real foundation. So they killed Kirk. I'm absolutely clear on that. I just don't, I can't see any other way to explain what happened. And now, the minute he's dead, all of a sudden the organization becomes this wacko pro-Zionist thing, which they never were before.
Mm. Well, he was
So
definitely pro-Israel, but the way that they're doing it now is a lot different.
yeah, I mean, he was pro-Israel in the way a lot of ignorant Americans were pro-Israel. It's like, hey, let them have their own country, and I don't really know what the details are of what's going on. I mean, it's inexcusable ignorance, but it's not malicious, right? It
Mm.
wasn't malicious. They didn't know. Well, and he was one of those people that just didn't know. Well, he knew. He saw with his own eyes, right? And he said, "This is wrong. I can't keep you." And once that, and I don't know how many of your viewers know, but the night before he was killed, one of the big Israeli propagandist rabbis that controls so many people in the United States was on the phone with him in the middle of the night.
I do remember that, yeah, and Josh Hammer was along on that phone call, I believe.
Yeah, and he sent text messages. By the way, everything I'm saying here is backed up. This is not my theory. He sent 2 text messages to people he was close to saying, "I think they're going to kill me."
Yeah.
And then, so now he's dead, and now his wife is suddenly the grieving widow is suddenly the head of the organization, and now she's having meetings with Bibi Netanyahu,
Yeah, it's
and acting like the organization is, we're Israel's best friend. It's just so it seems pretty clear what happened, and in the same way that the structure is so similar. Young man, charismatic, very high profile, not against Israel, but not willing to tolerate misbehavior on the part of Israel, gets shot. You know, and the next similarity is the FBI can't seem to understand or do anything. They managed to find some random patsy guy who's still in jail. That poor kid. He obviously didn't pull the trigger. There's no way he did. So history is repeating itself so closely. Now, Kirk wasn't president of the United States, but you know what? Had he lived, he might have been vice president. He could have been president someday. I mean, he was really on a very strong trajectory within that conservative Christian community, which is a very large part of the United States. I mean, I don't have much personal interaction with it, but when I actually step back and look at how my country's structured, that conservative Christianity thing is big, and they're powerful. A lot of industrialists, a lot of very wealthy people who are Christian gravitate to that flavor of Christianity. So they have a lot of power. So if you want to become a politician in the United States, look at Trump. Like he's the most irreligious man that ever lived, and yet he's always posing with these guys, praying with them. I mean, it's such ludicrous nonsense. But yeah, I think so. If we have to reach the Christian conservatives, and it's hard. I have a close friend who shocked me to death when he was going on and on about how we have to get behind Israel and Hamas.
Well, no, I mean, absolutely. This is the reason I tell my audience this, and people sometimes when they watch my channel, they're a bit confused because I mean, I'm Palestinian, but they notice that a lot of my content sometimes I try to be pretty. I don't want to say politically. I'm very not politically neutral, clearly, but I have a lot. I do have a large conservative base, and I mean, I see them in my comments, and I don't really try to take a too leftist or too right wing stance. I always tell my audience, I think both sides against Zionism is my main focus.
That's key. Yeah.
And I think that Americans, especially, or not just pro-Palestine, truly putting America first. Putting America,
That's what's so frustrating about this. This is an America first issue. And by the way, Kirk was feeling that. Tucker Carlson feels that. Candace Owens feels that. There's plenty of conservatives that are feeling that. And yeah, it is an American first issue.
yeah, and it's it's really the conservative right, the mainstream conservative right that will shift things because on the left there already is that momentum. It's the conservative right that's really the last stronghold to do this. So do you think that the efforts, and now we've kind of shifted to Charlie Kirk, but that's fine. I think it's worth talking about. Do you think that their efforts are going to be successful? I also noticed that some people are starting to wake up to the propaganda. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think people are, but the question is, there's so many things that I mean, I'm too old to be overly optimistic. You
Yeah,
know, I'm hoping. It's. I mean, it should go this way for the sake of humanity. You
yeah,
know, and I always tell everybody this is a humanity issue. This is not a regional issue. This is not a conflict between two groups. It's not. That's a ridiculous. This is really about the future of humanity. Honestly,
yeah,
this is, because what this group but I use the shorthand industrialists. What this group will do to one group, they'll easily turn around and do to you tomorrow. This is what people don't understand. Like
absolutely.
today it's Gaza, tomorrow it's Texas.
Yeah,
If they decide they need to regiment, they need to steal everything in Texas, they'll come in and do that too.
yeah,
Uh, So, do I have hope? I mean, I do see the tide is absolutely turning. We could not have a conversation like this even 3 or 4 years ago. I mean,
No,
this was
absolutely
considered
not.
so radical, so crazy that
Absolutely not.
we'd be considered lunatics. But the idea of bringing people together, that's what the reason I put the book out about Kennedy. Kennedy was one of our most beloved presidents, and people should know that there's a lot of evidence. Well, it goes beyond evidence because Angleton was a Zionist.
Yeah,
He the Zionists called him a Zionist,
yeah,
and many of the organized crime figures that we all know were involved in the assassination, they were Zionists, you know.
yeah,
So people need to know that there's a better than even chance that there were Israeli forces involved in the murder of both Robert and John Kennedy. And that which, if all Americans knew that, as you point out in my book, I'm not giving a theory. I'm giving the actual formerly classified letters, cables, telegrams that went back and forth between the Kennedys and the Israeli government. It's clear as day they were in a battle.
yeah. No, I
And
agree, and I think more information is coming to light. I'm actually gonna be doing a entire series on his brother RFK because his brother, the Pati, was actually a Palestinian Christian. So Sirhan, who's still alive today in San Diego prison. I'm gonna be doing a very much so much longer deep dive on that as well because I think that is pretty. It's pretty shocking. It's really shocking, and the fact that they've been able to get away with it for so long is really unfortunate. But I'm hoping that the tides have turned. I'm
it
hoping that
is.
but it's more so it's not on a it hasn't turned on a policy level. If anything, the policies have actually gotten much worse.
Yeah, and in my book, the last chapter, I do talk a lot about the assassination of Robert Kennedy, and I talk a lot about Sirhan, and it's so obvious that he was a mind control victim. There's hundreds of threads of evidence that show that.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Absolutely. Well, this was really great. I mean, I think we could honestly talk for hours, but Ken, I really appreciate it just coming on today. This was such a great conversation. And for everybody who hasn't purchased his book yet, definitely suggest you do so. JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionist Extremism. Ken, any last words or anything else you want to touch on? We should definitely do another show. I think my audience is really going to enjoy this one.
Right, there's so many things, but I'm glad you're on YouTube. And I'll say this, guys, when you give a thumbs up to a show, it actually helps the show get shown to more people. So it's an easy thing to do.
Definitely.
You just go there and you hit the thumbs up, and boom. And you had a great following. I didn't know about your TikTok because I'm not a TikTok fellow.
Yeah.
Um, I found out about you through YouTube, but YouTube for some reason seems to be a little bit more willing to allow people to talk.
Well, I
Uh,
stopped. I haven't posted on TikTok. I'm kind of over it right now. I'm trying. I need to still post on there because I know there's still a mainstream base, and I don't want to. I don't want to, not put this content out to everybody. But the suppression on there is crazy at this point. I mean, it's shocking that Instagram now I have better reach than TikTok. So
it is extraordinary. So I think support Wally, and it's easy to do. Just thumbs up the show, tell people about it. We've seen Jen Perlman's show. We were both on Jen's show. It started very small, and it's growing beautifully now, thanks to the support of the listeners. And you really can have a big influence on that because even though we all know, there aren't a lot of people talking about what you and I are talking about today.
yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it, Ken. Thanks so much, and thank you so much for being on. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.